Good morning, everyone, and welcome. It's great to see everybody on this rainy day. At this time, I'd like to call our special call meeting to order. I need a motion to go into executive session.
Madam Chairperson, I would like to make a motion to go in executive session to discuss personnel recommendations.
Mr. Klein has made a motion and a second from
Second.
Mrs. Mosley. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The motion carries. We'll transition at this time to conference room A. Thank you. The meeting will come back to order. I'd like to inform everyone that we just left executive session to discuss personnel matters. No decisions were made and no votes were taken. However, we do have a recommended motion from the administration that requires action. Do I have a maker of the motion?
Madam Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Sailors?
I make a motion to accept the administration's personnel recommendations.
Mr. Sailors has made a motion. Ms. Goodwin Caldwell has made a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The motion carries. Do I have a motion to conclude our special? Oh, excuse me. Dr. Royster would like to make an introduction at this time.
Ms. Taylor is actually with us this morning, so Sandy Taylor, congratulations. Sandra Taylor, who is the newly appointed principal at Blue Ridge Middle School. And I believe you have somebody with you.
I have my husband Jody Taylor, and my children are at school in the
Oh, well, good. Congratulations again. We look forward to you being in that leadership role at Blue Ridge. Know you'll do an outstanding job, and thank you for being here with us this morning. Congratulations.
Ms. Taylor, congratulations on behalf of the board, and as Area 17 representative, we certainly welcome you as our new leader at Blue Ridge Middle School. So thank you again. And sorry I didn't see you back there. Do I have a motion to adjourn our special call meeting? I think Mr. Sailors made the motion. Do I have a second? Ms. Mosley has made a second. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Our meeting is adjourned at 8:39 a.m. and we will begin our CAL meeting promptly at 9 o'clock a.m. So see you back in here at 9. The meeting will come to order. Welcome to our February Board of Trustees Committee of the Whole meeting. It's great to see everyone present today, and we appreciate everyone for being here. Our first matter of business is approval of the consent calendar. Are there any corrections to the minutes posted for our Committee of the Whole session on January 14th, 2025? If there are no corrections, I need a motion to approve the minutes.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Ms. Middleton has made the motion. Ms. Mosley has made the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The motion carries. Our second matter of business is appearance of visitors, and just wanted to let everyone know that we have no visitors today. So we'll move right along to our third matter of business, and that is instruction. Ms. Brett will be leading us as the chair of instruction. Ms. Brett, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Madam Chairman. On 3.01, we have innovative course and honors course approvals. Dr. Royster?
Thank you, Ms. Brett. If I might, before Mr. McCoy undertakes that item, I would like to recognize a newly appointed Associate Superintendent for Academics, Dr. Stevens. Congratulations. Mr. McCoy, if you would present regarding the innovative course and honors course approvals.
Yes. Similar to all the other months, February, March that we have done, February and October we have done, these innovative courses are really in three buckets this time. You'll see an honors course. As you know, we've been working to try, once the state changed the honors rubric, we've been working to update courses for honors level. So you'll see a course or two in there, marketing, I believe, for honors. There's also a couple math courses in there, honors level, that as you all know, well, you're going to know in a little bit when I do my presentation, the state is changing the math pathway. So as a result, the state puts in CP codes in the course catalog. They do not put honors codes typically. So we're bringing those courses forward as honors courses. That's the statistical modeling course. So the state has the CP level. We're putting in the honors level of that. And then those other courses you see in there, those lit labs, we've had those courses for many, many years. They were always state codes, state catalog codes. The state removed all those codes from the course catalog when they were cleaning things up. So we're just bringing those forward as innovative courses because the state has removed them from their catalog and directed us to bring them towards the board for innovative course approvals if we're continuing to use those. So that happens occasionally as well. So those are really the three buckets that we have courses in for you this time for the innovative course approvals. And we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. Do we have any questions? Ms. Doolin?
I would just like to make a motion to approve the local board courses as presented.
Do I have a second? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, that passes.
Okay, how do you get back to the agenda?
Now we are looking at 3.02, and that is State Standards and Assessments Overview. I myself am real interested in seeing this presentation, and I'm excited about it. Dr. Royster, do you have anything to add before we start?
Thank you, Ms. Brett. Just briefly, we have mentioned and referenced a number of times about the complexity and the scope of the standards that our teachers are required to ensure are taught at each grade and or subject level. And so we thought it would be a good time to show kind of a practical look at what our students will be seeing on a test and what our teachers are responsible for ensuring that they have a thorough working knowledge of in order to do well on those tests and to prepare for the next level of the course, because the standards build one on the other, moving from grade level to grade level. So Mr. McCoy and the academics team have worked to put together this presentation, which gives you not only an overview, but I believe also an opportunity, Jeff, to be tested. Is that correct? You're not going to post the grades on the wall or anything,
Oh, we'll not post the grades.
but everybody in here can participate. And I believe it's set up that if there are people that are listening to this, if
Yes,
they want to participate live, they can do so as well.
that is correct. We will give you the directions for doing that in a little bit, as far as when we get to the first quiz question at the end of each of these sections for the standards. The questions, by the way, are questions that the South Carolina Department of Education has released as part of the blueprint for what our kids actually, are tested on. Similar questions our kids are tested on the South Carolina Readiness Test or the EOC test. So you'll get to experience some of those in a little bit. You're getting a printed copy of the questions. I think you'll be able to see them all on the screen, but just in case, we thought we'd give you a copy of the questions, just so you could, some of the passages, as you know, the reading ones particularly are pretty hefty in reading. So we tried to find shorter passages. I will just point out that most of the questions for reading are very long. They may be 3 or 4 paragraphs for the kids to read. So we had to choose some smaller ones for you today. So we'll go to each section and we'll have kind of quiz questions throughout this, and you'll do it electronically on your computer. And I'll give you those directions here in just a second on how to do that. So I wanted to kind of just to give you an overview again of the state standards and the content areas. Currently, there are 8 content areas that the state has standards associated with them. So those top 4 are what we call the core. Those are the typical subjects that we are tested in. Not every grade, not every subject. We'll talk about that in a second. But those are typically your core, your English, math, science, social studies that are tested on the state assessments. The bottom ones, the non-core, the state still has standards for those. They're just not tested standards. So we have standards for PE that our physical education teachers use. We have visual and performing arts, world languages, and then health education. So we do have all of those. Again, they're just not tested grades on an assessment. This chart here really kind of shows you what actually is tested, what grade levels and what subjects. So you can see the orange denotes the subjects that are tested under each of those in the grade levels under each of those categories. So for English, for example, obviously grades 3 through 8 are tested, and then English 2 is the EOC. You all will remember we only have 1 EOC per course that we test now. That changed maybe 5 or 6 years ago as far as 1 course. So you see those are English 2, Algebra 1, Biology, and U.S. History and Constitution. You also recall a couple years ago, the state changed Science and Social Studies to come in line with federal requirements, or at least federal guidelines is what we could do, where we don't have to test every grade and subject in Science and Social Studies. So the state aligned, and the state came back to, we test in grades 4 and 6 in elementary, middle school, and then biology. Social studies, we only test U.S. Constitution and history. That's the only EOC that is tested at the state level. There is no grade levels K through 8 tested at the state level for social studies. And then, so English language arts, we'll start with English language arts. And just looking at our state rankings, I don't remember if we shared this information with you before. At the beginning of the year, I think it may have been in our presentation we did with the testing workshop. But the color coding there just tells us where we were last year with rank versus where we are this year with rank. So for example, again, 3rd grade, we ranked 10th in the state of the 70, I believe 8 districts now that we're in. We ranked 10th in the state, and that was an increase from last year. So again, reds would be areas where we maybe fell a rank or 2. Green is where we've risen a rank or 2, and then yellow is where we have kind of remained the same. So again, 5th grade language arts, we were 9th last year, we're 9th again this year in the state. And that is based on the state rankings of test scores. So to Dr. Royster's point with the state standards, and we'll dive into this a little bit, one for each subject matter, but you can kind of see, and we'll give some examples of this so you can kind of see what it looks like. The new English standards, they came out in 2024, so we have standards changed every few years, obviously. Math standards are changing next year. English standards changed this year. So those are 2024 English standards. And if you were to look at that document, it's a hefty document, K through 12, you would see the 4 areas we see over here on the right: foundations of literacy, applications of reading, research, and written and oral communication. Those themes are in every grade level K through 12. So I can go and see applications of reading in every single grade for every content area K through 12. English 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And then the standards are, and the indicators are indicated for you up there on the screen. So for example, we'll go to second grade, there's 24 standards and 33 indicators for second grade that they have to teach. Now, again, as you all probably know, some of those standards take several weeks to teach. They're hefty standards. Some of those standards aren't taught once and moved on. They're taught multiple times throughout the year because they're big standards. When you think about writing standards, for example, that's not a standard you hit and move on from. That's a standard you're going to spend a good bit of time and continue to come back and review. And we'll kind of see an example of what those standards and indicators look like. But to Dr. Royster's point, it's a lot of standards. It may not look like when you do the math and think, well, that's only 50 standards and indicators throughout the whole year. Well, we only have 180 days of school, and almost all of those standards take more than a day to teach to really for kids to master in there. And so this is an example. Again, you can go on the State Department website if you choose, and you can look at the standards documents. They have them out there for public consumption for every grade level, and you can see. So it starts, again, that first one up there is a first grade ELA standard that know and apply phonics and word analysis skills in decoding and encoding words. So that would be a good example of a standard that you're not teaching just one time. That's going to be a standard that teacher uses throughout the year because there's many words that have to be decoded. There's many words that they're going to apply phonics to. So that's kind of an ongoing standard. Once they teach that, they're going to keep coming back and hitting that so the kids know how to decode and know how to analyze words. And then I won't read that whole one in English 2, but you can see in English 2 that one ELA.C.3, write narrative to develop real or imagined experiences using effective techniques. In this example, the indicators below tell you what the effective techniques are. It tells you what the students must be able to do on the state assessment. So what does that mean? If they're asked on the state assessment to write a narrative, those are the indicators below there that they're going to have to be able to effectively communicate on their essay or their narrative that they're writing. So you can see again, provide that very last one there, providing ending or conclusion that clearly connects the narrative's relevance to the intended purpose of the writing. So you can tell, again, if you've taught English or if you're good at writing, that's not a one-time hit that in 30 minutes or 40 minutes standard and you move on. That's going to be a long-term teaching children how to write or how to provide that conclusion that connects it back to the intended purpose of that writing or that theme of that narrative, if you will. So again, narrative writing is something we spend a good bit of the year on. So that standard would be hit multiple times throughout the year to make sure kids have truly mastered it. So we're going to take a little quiz. So again, some quiz questions based on the tests that a kid might take in SC Ready. So we'll start with some younger grade levels. We'll do some quiz questions at the 3rd and 4th grade level, and we'll do some at the biology level, or in this case, the English 2 level, to see what we know and what we remember from our high school days and experiences on there. Before I go on to that question, though, I will just point out, we've done this a couple of times before, but for those of you new or need a refresher, every question is going to have that little chart there on the side that talks about the difficulty level, okay? So we talk about 3 levels of DOK, depth of knowledge is what that stands for, the depths of knowledge. So depth of knowledge 1 is just really normally recall. So that's going to be things like, you know, what year was the country founded? What year? That's just going to be quick recall questions that kids should be able to answer very quickly. And then as you move up into 2 and 3, 3 is going to be a little bit more difficult question to answer. That's going to be require you to analyze something in there. So you can also see within each of those DOK levels, the state has broken it up into a low, a medium, or a high level question with each DOK. So for the questions we will do for you today, we have pointed out to you which level of DOK and level within the DOK that question is. So for the first question here, what we're going to ask you to do is you can read it on your paper or you can read it on the screen if you can read it. The standards at the top, this is actually a DOK low level, so DOK 3, so highest depth of knowledge, but a level 1, so to speak, or a level low, if you will, within that DOK 3. So I'll give you a second to read that. And if you will, just keep in mind what answer you're going to have, because I'll take you to the next screen and you'll have to choose A, B, C, or D. So just read that, choose your answer, and then we'll go to the next page where you actually are going to vote on what your answer is. So you could mark that on your paper. Notice the last paragraph there, it does say which title would best describe the topic. That's why this is a DOK 3. It does have a specific answer, but it does require the kids to choose the best answer. There is, in other words, it's not a clear cut necessarily answer. All right, everybody got their answer in play? All right, so circle that on your paper or whatever, however you want to keep track of it. You'll only have to do this one time on your computer. You can use your cell phone if you choose to. It's probably easier on your computer to do this. If you'll just go to on your computer polyev.com/JeffMcCoy489. So polyev.com/JeffMcCoy489. Give you a chance to do that. I know, our kids start testing so early too. Actually, they started about now.
If you enlarge the QR code, they might be able to get it with their phones. Oh, I mean.
You can just text, if you put in the 2 where you're typing, if you're using your cell phone, you can just put in where you actually put somebody's number. You can just type 22333, and then in the body of the text, just type Jeff McCoy 489. Oops.
I'm trying to
Oh,
make it
that's
so that
scary.
it's bigger. Messed it up. How do we enlarge?
Yeah, if it asks you to register for credit, just skip that where it says skip. Well, you put, if your name's not here up there, so if you feel comfortable with your answer, that's fine. You can put that in there, or it's gonna say, what all your correct answers were. Yeah. And then up here in the bottom, like 2, 2, 3, 3. Yes, and in the bottom, just type in Jeff McCoy 489. Yeah, Jeff McCoy 489. That should join your home. Yes, ma'am. You only have to do this one time. Once we're in, we'll be into the whole presentation. You join, you're good. You're good for now. So you should be able to. Just put it in. Okay, you're there. I just want to try.
As far as
So
I
if you're there on
know.
the screen, you
Maybe
can
at the
make your
doctor.
selection. If you're on your phone, you just type A, B, C, D, and hit send. So either way, go ahead and put your selection in.
She might be at the doctor.
You can see we've got 23 responses right now at the top. That's what that little number at the top means, 23 responses. All right, everybody got theirs in? Yes. Mhm. But wait till we get to the question because it'll actually activate it. All right, so we have on here, did everybody get theirs in? All right, there we go, we're coming in now. All right, so which one, what answer did we put down? Sure, yell it out. B? Okay, yes, 96% of you said that we had B here, so that is the correct answer. Do what? Yeah, that's right. I don't know who. It was anonymous. We didn't ask. It was anonymous on there. So it was anonymous. All right. So this question here is a 4th grade ELA. So this is again, take a moment. I will pull this up here in just a second and activate it for you. This question here. So here's the zoo. So again, get your answer in play, and then we'll go to the next question. Some of you may have already gone to the next question, but. There you go. You can join now. Now you're good. Okay, got the question? Yeah, it'll come up. Yeah, that actually activates the poll. I just want to be trying to read it. It should come back. Let me see. Okay, that's weird. Okay, we've got about 19 responses in there. Did it come back in? Did it come back in?
Oh, look at us. Good job, everybody.
All right. Yes, as Ms. Mosley said, this is just like it is in the classroom. It's kind of like being real in the classroom, except I only have 12 of you instead of 30 of you, so 25 of you. All right, so what did we say here? I put the answers up on the screen, but probably before you even saw it. Yep. All right. So yeah. So C. I think working at the zoo would be the best type of job. All right. And then finally, we have an English 2 question. So this one might be a little different for you. Again, if you go on the standards and look at these questions, most of these English 2 questions are very long. I couldn't put that in a, it would take us 20 minutes to read the passage and answer the question. So we had to find the easiest one in English 2, so to speak. So this is a DOK2 medium question, okay? DOK2 medium question. And I'll give you just a second. Oh, some of you already started to put it in there, so perfect. Oh, we got some different opinions on this one coming in. Okay, I'm going to go to the, oops. I'm actually not going to go to that slide because I don't want you to see the responses yet. Hang on one second. Duplicate that. Yeah, I hope not. Certainly hope not. That is correct. Or as many of you did, now we're not on the actual testing site, but as Ms. Mosley had some issues, some of you other had some issues, that's actually pretty common with the testing too for the kid. There will be online, there will be some issue that we have to try to troubleshoot for the kid on the computer. So yeah, I mean, so that's a real, exactly what we experience is a real thing on the testing environment. We did get rid of all our Scantron machines. All right, let's see where we stand. Anybody want to give the answer before I show it? let's see. Yeah, we had a few different answers on this one. We had 4% said A, and then there was another one down here. I think it was, and then once somebody said D, or I don't know what percent, because I don't know how many people were joined actually, but so 92% got the answer correct. That was B. Which one? Sorry. Oh.
You're about to get letters. You're about to get letters.
That's a valid question. Using that evaluation and judgment, that's good. You okay, Chris? Asking questions. So math standards, again, so moving on to math, and then we'll kind of answer some questions here for math as well. So here's where we are with our state rankings for math. You can kind of see, we actually had a really good year in math this past year. We went up in almost every grade level in math. We had an exceptionally good year in Algebra 1, where we moved back into the 10th of the state. We were in the 20s last year, the year before that. So had a really good year in Algebra 1. You see 2 grade levels, we dropped slightly. Those were slight drops in 3rd and 4th grade, but they were still a drop in rank. So this is one thing we want to spend just a minute for you to understand what the new math pathway is. The State Department has changed the math pathways for South Carolina effective next year beginning. And you can kind of see up here, they also for the first time ever have actually released an advanced math pathway. We've always had advanced math pathways in Greenville, but that has been up to every district to determine. The state has now released their advanced math pathway. You can see that up in the dotted box there, and I'll read that to you because I know it's hard to read. But what it is now, if you remember, those of you who've been around a little bit, the current math pathway is 6th, 7th grade in 6th grade, 7th, 8th grade in 7th grade, and then Algebra 1 in 8th grade. So essentially they're doing 2 years worth of math in 6th grade, 2 years worth in 7th, and then they go into Algebra 1. The state is changing that now to 6th grade will be 6th grade advanced math, 7th grade will be 7th grade advanced math, and 8th grade math, part of 8th grade math, half of 8th grade math. And then 8th grade will be geometry and 8th grade math. So there'll be half a semester 8th grade math in 7th grade, the other half in 8th grade plus geometry on top of that. Okay, so changed a little bit with that new math pathway for the advanced in math. For the high school, that's what this big graphic here is in the high school. If you remember, we used to do Algebra 1, used to be our gateway course. Algebra 1 is no longer the gateway course. Geometry is now the gateway course. So kids that used to take 8th grade Algebra 1 will now take 8th grade geometry instead. In 9th grade, same thing. If you take your regular middle school course, in 9th grade, you will start with geometry now. So they'll do geometry in 8th grade. It's actually called geometry and statistics. The state got rid of probability and statistics, and they shoved that coursework into geometry and Algebra 2. So geometry is now geometry with statistics. Then the kids move to Algebra 1. Then they will move to Algebra 2 with probability. And then you can kind of see from there, they've got some choices, how they want to take those choices. The course you just approved a second ago in Innovative Courses was statistical modeling. We brought forth the honors level course. The state now has a course called statistical modeling, which is CP and now honors with your approval in a few weeks with the board course. Kids can take however discrete math, they can take AP, do enrollment, whatever. The state also added back in something we had gotten rid of a couple years ago. Some of you were around when we did career tech or tech prep courses. The state has added those sort of back in. So those 2 courses are now called Applications and Modeling and Reasoning and Mathematics. Now you'll see one note there, and Greenville's not the only one that's doing this. We do require a parent's signature if students are going to follow that path, because what it does is it basically takes them out of the 4-year college option to do that, okay? It's not to say they can't eventually make their way back to 4-year college, but if you stop at Algebra 2 and you go Applications and Modeling and Reasoning and Mathematics, by the Commission of Higher Education's definition, you are not college ready. College ready requires that you have one level of course above Algebra 2 that requires Algebra 2 as a prerequisite. So all those courses from pre-calculus down to the dual enrollment, all of those require Algebra 2 as a prerequisite, which means any kid that goes Algebra 2 and in any one of those courses, they would be considered 4-year college ready. So it's not that kids can't take that pathway in green. We'll allow kids to take that pathway in green. We just want to make sure the parents understand what they're signing up for and the kids are signing up for. There may be kids that are saying, look, I want to go weld and I want to go to a 2-year college. Then that path may suit them just fine to do that. It would just be more difficult to get to a 4-year college because they're not going to have the prerequisites to get there. So still can do it. We just require parent signature. And then you can kind of see again as it goes up, most kids would take a calculus, AP Calc, or dual credit calculus in that if they do a 5th year. Some of our kids do 5th and 6th year math, so that's kind of that pathway that would go. Yes, ma'am.
They still have to have that, they still have to have the algebra 2.
Yes. Yep. So on that path, so this algebra 2 over here would be we put 2 and 4-year college up there because some kids they could actually technically go all the way to calculus and still only do a 2-year college, which is fine on that. It's just that path below that one that's in green, that is not 4-year. Again, doesn't mean they can't get there. It is a 2-year. That green would be a 2-year. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 2 would be a 2-year. What we have not yet allowed what we're not doing in Greenville County, you technically can do geometry, algebra 1, and then drop down to those green courses. If you do that, then you're not college bound at all. And again, we could allow that with make sure parents truly understand what they're signing up for. We want to make sure every parent understands that, every kid understands that. Say, if you want to go to 2-year college, then sure, do the green path if you choose to do that. If you want to do a 4-year college, though, immediately right out of high school, you need to take that orange path because that's going to get you to 4-year college. For most kids, because I know this question will probably come up, Prob and Stats was the course that most kids took after Algebra 2 because that was generally considered for the kids that was average in math. That was the course that was probably the one that they would be most successful in. That one's gone. Most likely the kids will go into discrete math for that. That's a little bit more, or statistics and modeling. Those are the 2 courses that we've looked at that probably are the ones most aligned to the old Prob and Stats courses in there. Discrete's a little difficult. So again, some kids may do statistical. Those kids that may be your average students in math may take statistical or AP. I'm sorry, statistical or discrete math. Okay? And we can answer some more questions on that once we finish this as well. So the math standards, these are the new standards. These are not the old standards. So to be very clear, we have not yet tested on these. That new test will come next year. We will still be under the old test this year. So these standards here, you can see they have greatly pared them down. That was one of the big complaints that Dr. Royster mentioned. The state has really looked at trying to pare down standards. That's why we've shoved content and moved stuff around a little bit. Not we, the state, and their committees. But you can see, for example, in 3rd grade, you've got 7 standards for the year, 26 indicators. Again, they're big. Some of those standards will take 2 and 3 weeks to cover. But they're better than having 30 standards that the teachers have to keep up with and cover. Those 5 standards over on the right-hand side there, that is the themes that run through those standards. So you pull that document, you're going to see one from K through 12 on representation and communication. Obviously, it looks different in kindergarten than it looks like in Algebra 2. Okay. So again, just an example of the. I'm sorry, Dr. Royster.
Before you move off of that, I think it's good to know. While not a problem at middle school or high school, Jeff mentioned this earlier, the English standards change this year. The math standards are changing next year. So teachers at the elementary level have got to accommodate in a 1-year window change to the curriculum in the 2 primary subjects that they teach. That's huge. Now, again, middle school, high school, doesn't matter. I mean, math teachers didn't have to change something this year. Theirs is a one-time, not a back-to-back change. Now, it's a significant change, but one of the real problems with some of what's done and the manner in which it's done is this requiring an elementary teacher to adopt a totally new ELA curriculum in 1 year, and right around the next year, we adopt a brand new mathematics curriculum.
And that's a good point. It does take a teacher time to get used to it. It takes more than 1 year to get used to a new curriculum. So that we'll be essentially doing 2 at the same time. And then some of you also recognize these new math standards, if you go look at them, I'm very much in favor of this. They really emphasize conceptual understanding of math. And you know, we've been dealing with that the last 3 years. That's why we've struggled a little bit. Our state has struggled with math scores because prior to that, we weren't doing really conceptual math. As most of us were taught, most of us know place value, but if you were asked to explain place value and why it works, maybe less of us could do that because we weren't taught that way. We were taught based on how to move the number with the decimal and how many zeros it had, but we weren't really taught why we were doing that. So this goes into much more of the why behind it. So a lot of times when parents will complain sometimes about the new math or this math is so different from what we taught, it is different. The way we're doing it's different because the kids have to understand the conceptual understanding behind the math. That gets very much important when you get into those calculus and pre-calculus areas of math, because that's where kids really, we've even noticed in our own district, they struggle. Because even good math kids will struggle once they hit calc and pre-calc because they don't understand conceptually why math works and how it works. They were taught the tricks, but they weren't taught the why behind the tricks. So these new math standards really dive heavy into conceptual understanding of math. Now, I will point out, based on our rank, as you saw a second ago, that rank 10th in algebra, as much as our teachers have really struggled in elementary and middle school to really teach that conceptual understanding, our Algebra 1 teachers, many of the ones I've talked to have said, our kids are coming to Algebra 1 much better prepared. Like they actually do understand things, and that's reflected now in our algebra scores. Moving to 10th, we were 28th a few years ago, and we moved up to 10th. So that has been very good for us. It's just been a very difficult journey for our elementary and middle school teachers in there, but they're coming along. All right, and then again, similar standards you can kind of see here, but again, in Algebra 1, use statistical reasoning to summarize, represent, and interpret data in 2 categorical and quantitative variables. Some of you, if you've been a little out of school like me for a little while, may not even know exactly what that question's asking in there because it's been a while since we've had Algebra 2 or Algebra 1. But that's an example of, again, not a one-day standard. That's something that's going to be caught over multiple days, and you can see all those ones underneath of that. All of those things are actually the indicators that support that standard that the teacher are going to teach. That might be a 2-week unit that's in there. All right, so testing our knowledge again. So this is a 3rd grade math question, so we're going to start off easy. I'm sure all of you will get this right. Oh, got the first answer in. Oh, we got some differing choices here. Nope, somebody changed their mind. That's one thing we allowed you to do on here is to change your mind. By the way, on the SC Ready test or the EOC, kids do have the opportunity. They can go back and change their answers. Obviously not once the test is submitted, but they do have the ability to go back and change if they need to. Now, somebody on here made the same mistake I made when I did this question because I didn't read it careful enough. All right, what did we say? B is the correct answer. I originally chose C as well before I reread the question a little bit more carefully with the rounding option in there. But yes, 96% got it correct. All right, let's move to a 5th grade math question. 5th grade math question. Got some different questions, answers on this one too. By the way, if you would happen to need scratch paper, that would be available to you on the SC Ready test if you happen to need it. Certain questions would allow you to use a calculator as well.
How about fingers and toes?
You may use your fingers and toes. Not your neighbors. You may not phone a friend. All right, what's the answer? All right, most everybody did say C. We had a few people that did not. Oops, sorry, went off the screen here. There is some accommodations for that. Jason, I don't know how many that would be, but we do have, there's some accommodations if it's written into the IEP. If a student to take it on paper, they can take it on paper if it's written in the IEPs. That's correct. Or 504, but it would have to be an accommodation.
You had flexibility for the first 2 or 3 years of testing, Jeff, where you could opt to give it with paper, but that's no longer.
Correct. All right, and while that was a good question, I will say the benefit of the online testing is we get the results back so much quicker. It used to be we'd get the results so late that by the time you got them, they were almost unusable. It was almost, gave us good data, but it was almost too late to change things. And so that was the reason that online is a little better for us, because we get those results back pretty quick. You don't get them because they don't come public until October, but we actually get them in July. So we kind of know to be able to already start tweaking things, which is good for us. Yes. All right, so 7th grade math. You can see this is a DOK 2, so not the most difficult DOK. It's going to be a DOK 2, talking about donuts.
Can we have actual donuts for this?
You may not. Did not bring those. So as you can see, we're getting a little bit more into algebra here, getting some, getting to start to get to some pre-algebra as far as getting kids introduced a little bit before we hit that 8th grade, which is really our pre-algebra course, or algebra if kids are taking Algebra 1. This one's proving to be a little more difficult. Maybe it's been a few years since we've had algebra or pre-algebra. Okay. All right, what'd we say? What'd you say? Okay. Yeah, most people got the answer correct. We did have 1 or 2 that said D down here, but most people got it right. All right, and then moving to a little bit more difficult question, 8th grade math. Clearly the questions are getting harder. A little less assuredness this time. Uh-huh. It's been a little while for me too. All right, we good? All right, what answer did we come up with for this one? A? A is the correct answer. We had, however, as you can see, we had some C's. We had a D down there. They changed their mind. Had a D down there as well. I will point out here, do y'all notice how intense the literacy is, the reading and math is? That's another reason why even our English scores can affect our math scores. If kids struggle in reading, you can see a problem like this can really bog a kid down if they struggle to read, because it's more reading intensive. And by the way, we chose the ones that were least reading intensive for you, because not because you can't read, but because of the whole, it would take up pages of information for you to read through and really take a long time. So again, the literacy is so heavy now in math versus when we were taking tests, it was more just what's 355 divided by 6 or whatever it happens to be. That is no longer the case. There's a lot more problems like this now on the SC Ready where kids actually have to read and actually answer a question and reason. You saw the reasoning in that the kids had to do. So now the most complicated one we will do is Algebra 1. Do a little equation here. Yes, sorry. Oh. All right, we're kind of all over the place on this one. Oh. So we have a little answers all over the place here. A, B, C, and D. Correct answer was A. A, B, C, D. I missed this as well. That'll be no surprise to those of you who know me, and algebra is not my area, but that was not the answer I had as well. C was the most popular answer. A, B, C, and D. So that, as you can see, again, if we go back, there's a lot of reasoning that has to happen inside that question. So these aren't quite as cut and dry as they used to be, that you and I might be used to doing over time. All right, so science. Again, we only have 2 subjects that are really, well, 3, if you will. That's why for biology and, 4th and 6th grade, we do not have rankings for those because the tests change and we cannot compare. So that's why that says NA, because we cannot compare those answers back on there. Biology, we ranked 5th. That was an exceptionally well year for us in biology. If you recall, biology was a significant issue for us in the past. So we were like 20 or upper high 20s actually rankings. We moved up to 5th this past year. The high school principals really doubled down on really embracing those standards and those changes, and we had some really big success with that. So 5th in the state for biology, which is amazing. Again, one change here is science standards. This is the other difficult thing, as Dr. Royster mentioned. It's not as much difficult for middle and high school because you teach one subject. Elementary, they teach all subjects. So in science, there is no indicators. So there is no indicators in science, it's only standards. And you're gonna see why in a second. That little rope on the side is very important. That rope on the side is the 3 areas every standard encompasses. This is based on a national science standard, so it's not just South Carolina, this is based on national as well. But you can see the blue is science and engineering practices, disciplinary core ideas, and cross-cutting concepts. So every standard has those 3 strands through it. And you're gonna see what that looks like in just a second here. Remember the blue, green, and orange? There's the blue, green, and orange again. So you can see this is one standard. So this is a kindergarten standard. Use a model to represent, that's the engineering practices, the relationship between the needs, that's the cross-cutting concept, of different plants or animals, including humans, and the places they live. So again, the areas down in the blue, orange, and green are the parts of the areas that the kids would need to learn of those concepts. So kind of a little bit more difficult. Again, that's a second grade standard. I'll flip through those pretty quick. Second grade standard. We point that out to say, though, can you see as an elementary teacher, you're having to switch between standards and they're all different. The standards aren't the same as far as the format goes across all subjects. So this is very different from what the other ones are. And in biology, you can kind of see as it gets longer. Again, if you read that orange one there, system specialized cells and organisms, that's really what's going to help the teacher know what the kids need to know for the test. Like, what do we need to teach in order for the kids to know for that test? So that's how these standards are organized in biology. So for our for our question 9, our 4th grade science question, the medium DOK 2, so DOK 2, but a medium question. You've got a little graphic there, and you got to make a little bit of a, based on your knowledge, you got to make a little bit of an assumption there. So, and notice what the question is. Why did the student make this conclusion? Why did the student make this conclusion? So why is plant B better to survive drought? All right, we good? Well, what did you say the answer was? Yeah, I think 100% of the people got B correct. So good.
420 papers. What kind of math is this?
All right, 6th grade science. All right, we got some varied answers on this one as well. What was the correct answer? Okay, we had some D's and we had some B's and some C's. Okay, on there, but the correct answer was D. The student is most likely correct because it takes a long time for wind and water to wear away the Earth's surface materials. And then finally in science, the 11th grade biology. 11th grade biology, you have to look at a graphic. This is hard. This is a little more difficult one. But I'll point out it's only a DOK too. That tells you anything about the difficulty of the test. All right, do we have an answer? C, somebody said C. Yeah, we had kind of a split there between two. We had A and C were the two answers that were given, but C was the correct answer. It was C. Oh, I forgot about this one. So this is a little bit of a different one, and I can't replicate this on poll everywhere. So I'm going to give you get a little bit of a curveball here, but you also get a little bit of a grace here. So this one is very typical. It's hard to do on these types of situations, but notice it says select 2 statements. I don't know that you can select 2. I think I've set it up now that you can select 2 on yours, but select 2 statements that would support this claim. These are very common questions for our kids where they have to select more than one multiple choice. If it doesn't let you select 2, you can just select 1 and have the other one in mind. I think I set it up for you to select 2.
Yeah, I'm selecting 2.
Perfect. Okay, so we can select 2. Do what? Oh, this one's a little bit all over the board. All right. So you can see the difficulty of this as you're doing it. You can get 1 right, but wrong, which obviously would be partial credit or no credit, depending on how they score the test. This one does actually tell you how many to select. There are questions it doesn't tell you. It'll say select as many as might be true, or select as many. So a kid may have to select 2 or 4 or 6. It depends on how the questions go. So this one actually tells you to select 2, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it's open-ended where you've got to select however many you believe is correct. All right, so what do we think the answers were? All right, A and C, we've got answers all over the place, literally. But yes, A and C were the correct answers. So some of you may have gotten 1 right and not the other. Literally every question was selected somewhere in here. Now, you can't change your answers now in here. So again, a little bit more difficult of a question. And then finally with U.S. history, that is our 11th, we are 11th ranked. Again, pretty well. As you know from looking at scores, U.S. history is actually the worst EOC in the state for our state of South Carolina. So when you look at our score, it looks low, like how are our kids not performing better, but we're actually 11th ranked in the state. That kind of shows you where we rank with the whole rest of the 78 districts. So obviously we want to get that up, but we are number 11th ranked this past year, and that was a green. We did move up from, I think it was 14th or 15th, if I'm not mistaken. Now we're back to kind of the standards and indicators. So again, social studies revised back in 2019. You can see the trend was to go from less standards. In this case, we went to less standards and more indicators. So for example, when you look at 8th grade, it's 5 standards and 30 indicators that they have to know. So what's that look like? These standards are a little bit more difficult to look how they are set up. So you can see this is a 3rd grade standard demonstrating understanding the relationship between Earth's environmental hazards and human activities. So again, that's not going to be a one-day thing. That's going to be a multi-week, because you can see all these little indicators here that they have to use maps and sources of geographic information to gather evidence and draw conclusions, develop a natural disaster safety plan. I will say one thing I like about the new social studies standards is they are more experiential. They try to get kids more hands-on doing things than just memorizing facts and things. So that was a big shift for our social studies teachers. Less rote memory and more actual drawing conclusions about things, which is probably better where we need to be anyway. So again, 5th grade standard demonstrating understanding of conflicts, innovations, and social change in the United States, including South Carolina from 1950 to 1980. 8th grade demonstrating understanding of the impact of world events on South Carolina and the United States from 1929 to present. Remember, 8th grade is our South Carolina history year in middle school. So pretty much everything they do in there is going to be tied back to South Carolina somehow. So whether it's happening in the world or the country, how does it relate and how does South Carolina fare because of that? And then U.S. history demonstrating understanding of how the American identity, both at home and abroad, was affected by imperialism, world conflict, and economic boom and bust in the period 1893 to 1945. So again, if anybody's taught social studies, that's a massive standard. That's a huge multi-week standard that kids are going to have to learn. There's a lot of pieces in there. And again, those indicators underneath that is going to tell you what it is that they need to do. I didn't point this out with the enduring understanding. That is really what they want kids to walk away. If you don't know anything else, that enduring understanding is really what you need to walk away from that standard knowing. So in this case, increasing global intervention led to opposing points of view regarding America's proper role. emerging global connectedness contributed to the Great Depression and a return to neutrality and isolationism. World War II permanently shook America out of a policy of isolationism and neutrality and into the global society. So again, that's what they want kids to walk away from, which would be something teachers would hit pretty hard because of the test. All right, your last two questions have to deal with U.S. history, maybe a little bit more familiar subject for us. Oh, just this one. Yeah, just choose one. So now this one's a little tricky because if you haven't had U.S. history in a little while, again, this would have been based on the content of the class, so none of us have had the benefit of going through a class recently. So you have to go rely on your memory a little bit. All right, what did we come up with as an answer? All right, D was the correct answer. We had A's and C's and D's in there. Again, that was based on kind of rote memory though, but majority of you got 67, the rest are changing their answers, that's good. Now we're back to 70%. All right, now last question. Again, you can see where literacy comes into play in a lot of these questions, even in social studies particularly. The literacy, they have to interpret a chart. So you're going to use that information in the table to answer the questions.
Same answer from the last one?
Oh, did I not change the answers? Oh, I did. I'm so sorry. Yep, I didn't. Yep, good point, Nancy. Nancy was paying attention. I forgot to change the answers. Yeah, everybody gets that one correct. That's a freebie. You get that one correct. So again, though, I'll just say you can see on the statement there, based on the information in the table, which statement best explains the differences in goods produced in the northern and southern colonies. So again, the kids, this will be a one-answer question. The kids would only answer this, would choose one answer. And we gave you one question to have multiple select answers. There's also, which I can't replicate on Poll Everywhere, that we would like to have replicated, but we just couldn't. There's a lot of drag and drop questions. So the kids actually have to drag from one column over to the other column as far as a correct answer goes. Can't replicate that in Poll Everywhere for you all, but it's, again, pointing out it's very different from the tests we took, that were mostly multiple choice Scantron, where you just did A, B, C, D, E, F. That was it. Now there's some of those, but they're more what they call complex multiple choice questions, where you actually have to choose multiple answers or unlimited number of answers. But a lot of times it's best. The other thing we didn't replicate because it's a little bit difficult is now it's also common in math for them to actually give you a problem that's worked out and tell you to explain why the problem is correct or not. Did the person who worked out the problem, did they get the right answer or did they not get the right answer? So that's a little bit more difficult, again, the thought process than just coming up with an answer. The kid has to actually explain why the problem is right or why the problem is wrong in there. So again, lots of writing and some different things in there. So a couple of things, how do we support teachers? You just got these questions, just got these kind of overview of the standards. So how do we support teachers? Some of you may have seen our curriculum maps. I know that's busy, it's hard to see up there. But if you look, it's broken down by quarter. So quarter 1, quarter 2, by 9 weeks, and quarter 3 and quarter 4. So you can see for quarter 1, for example, at the top there, where it says I can't read that myself, it's a little bit hard to see, where it says HMH Introduction to Reading. So what that would look like is module 1, 2, and 3 are done in the first 9 weeks. So teachers would need to cover modules 1, modules 2, and module 3 in that first 9 weeks. Each of those blue hyperlinks actually takes you to the unit. That is what teachers use in order to then that's what they use to then build their lesson plans. So teachers use our units mostly to build our lesson plans. So we support them with that. That's everything that has a standard. So that's not every course taught, but that's everything that has a standard. If it has a standard, then we have a map for it. So teachers know what the pace they need to stay on and what the units are. This overall is a pacing guide. I did kind of break down. This is the whole standards for 3rd grade math for the year. And I didn't put the indicators on here because there's too many of them. Remember, there's standards and indicators. These are just the standards. The white ones show you where there's repeats. So again, there's sometimes a teacher will hit a standard. I did math because English is hard because you do a lot of the same standards a lot over the course of the year. There are some repeats. So example, 3.MDA.5, you'll see that in quarter 1 and quarter 2. It's not a repeat, it's just that unit bridges quarter 1 and quarter 2. Okay, it's a unit that kind of sits in the middle of the two. So you kind of see again though, especially when we get to quarter 4, that some of this is intentional where we're bringing back the standards so teachers can review before the test. Some of the more difficult standards, the kids get access to it once more and once again. And then the power standard, something we started, I think it was last year and really heavy this year with Dr. Shepard and Ms. Holt-Hilke. They really have been working with our teams to build out the power standard. So as you saw all those standards, what we're doing is recognizing and identifying which of those standards are most important. In other words, we can't get to them all, to Dr. Royster's point. So which ones do we identify and spend the most time on because we know those are most likely to be tested? The state gives us a blueprint, so we kind of know which ones are going to be more heavily tested, which ones are going to be more heavily focused on. So these power standards actually for each module tell our teachers, hey, you need to focus on these. If you get to these, that's great, but you really need to focus on these because your kids really need to know these for the test because that's critical information for the test and for the next year as well. So that's one thing we rolled out this year to make sure that our teachers could kind of help narrow down a little bit more their focus on what they're teaching. All right, and then we're open to questions. I know some of you asked a few throughout that presentation, but we're open to questions if you have any across the board.
Thank you so much, Mr. McCoy. I think that was great. I do know that we do have a few people with questions. Ms. Mosley?
Okay, I have a couple of questions. Jumping all the way, way back at the very beginning of your presentation, where it showed, sorry, I'm looking for the slide. I believe it's number 4.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, because I noticed that in 3rd grade we jumped up, but 4th we went down, in 6th we went up, but 7th we went down. What's sort of the logic, or why would we, since those are back-to-back grades, not like?
Yeah, so that's hard to explain. So there is some cases where it has to do with the state and how other districts perform as well. Because there's a couple of those subjects where actually when we looked at it, we actually increased year over year. The previous year, we actually went up, but we fell in rank because districts around us or districts in the state exceeded us in test scores.
Okay.
So that ranking is going to depend on what other districts are doing as well.
Okay. So, sorry, I'm jumping around. So now that we have the new math pathway or whatever, where does the EOC fall for that?
So the EOC is still going to be the Algebra 1 EOC. They're not changing the EOC.
So students who are taking algebra, well, this starts next year?
This new math pathway starts next year, yes.
So will there be an EOC for any 9th grader?
Most likely no.
Okay.
There could be some second semester. We're still waiting on some guidance from the state on that because we do need to be careful about that. We wouldn't want 6 kids to take the EOC and that to be the entire district's EOC score, or 12 or whatever the end score is. But yes, the majority of those kids, for the majority, there will not be Algebra 1 scores next year.
Okay, so now in 10th grade, assuming someone's along the standard path, they would take an EOC and math and an English?
Yes, if they follow the traditional path, they would, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's why I'm asking, because before it was like almost.
It was staggered.
Well, what about biology? That was 9th grade? Is it now not?
It is 9th grade for some kids. The kids, it would be 9th or 10th grade, yes. Some kids take it in 9th grade. The kids that are fairly strong in science would take it in 9th grade. The kids that need a little bit more science would take something else and then take it in 10th grade. To your point though, we would stagger those. In other words, we wouldn't give a kid all 3 EOCs in one semester. They would have them all 3 in 1 year potentially, but we would try to stagger that between the 2 semesters.
Okay. I was thinking biology was more of a standard 9th grade class, so that's what I was asking. Okay, so let me just ask you this. When you talk about the math standards changing, I don't even know where that is that, whenever the state reevaluates the standards, are they looking for things that may or may not have been, like I remember when my kids were in school, it felt like we had standards that were not developmentally appropriate for a certain grade. So is that an improvement this year with, I mean, is that why they reevaluated the math and
Yeah, I think one of the reasons I reevaluated the math was because it was a lot of content in each of the standards for the courses. I think a lot of people, I think people are split around the state on whether geometry should be taught before Algebra 1. They have changed the content, so it wasn't your previous geometry class, and now they just moved it in front of Algebra 1. But even in the past, we've always followed the state path, but many districts actually had flopped geometry and Algebra 1 well before this path came out. So I think they did a good job of realigning and looking to see what do kids really need to know for Algebra 1 and put that course before Algebra 1 to try to do some previewing work for Algebra 1. But I do think the math, I would say their development of the appropriate, I would say they're a little bit more difficult because of the whole shift to conceptual math and understanding.
Well, I would agree with that. So what is, to go along with that, what is the logic? I've not ever understood the state having more standards than we can teach. I mean, they knowingly list more standards than we can teach. And I often feel like, I've had parents make the comment to me, and I've even felt like this as a parent, that sometimes it feels like a mile wide and an inch deep.
Yeah.
As far as content mastery.
Correct.
And so talk a little bit about that, because I don't really understand the logic. I'm not
I don't know that.
I'm not sitting at the state making those decisions.
I would say this, same thing. I still would say for U.S. history, for example, I don't think it's physically possible to cover the depth of U.S. history that I would say needs to be covered. The colleges split that. For example, our kids that take the dual credit, they split that into 2 years. U.S. history, so up to 18 something and then 18, not 20 something to present. I think it's very difficult, and I think that's what ends up happening. While those standards try to get kids more experientially involved, that's very difficult to do when you have so many standards and so much time period to cover. So I would say with these new math standards, I think that really was what they were trying to do, and Dr. Shepard is certainly more involved in that from the state level, but that's really what they were trying to do, was actually say, what do kids actually have to know, spread that out across some other courses, so we're not cramming everything into, a content just to get the standards in there, but then the kids really don't master it because it was too quick moving. And so I found South Carolina took that from other states that has done a better job of let's go slower and deeper, so the kids actually understand conceptually what's going on, so that they'll be better prepared for those advanced level courses in high school.
So I get that for math, but what about all of these other subjects? Because it sounds like we have, looking at, you said you have these power standards. You have power standards for all of the 4 content areas? Okay. So again, what is the logic behind having a district have to go through and figure out what do we think is the most important thing out of this list, when I don't even understand the logic of putting together a list that's longer than what we can accomplish.
And I don't know that it can comment on their logic either. If it was me and if I did it,
I just didn't know if they'd ever said that. Someone's sitting up there in the State Department, creating these standards, and
I think some people truly think they're doable, but if you actually taught the courses, they're really not doable. I've never, even when I was teaching in 2000 and to 2005 or 6 when the standards were out, even back then the standards were unteachable. All of those you couldn't get it all into 1 year. There was just no way. So that's always been kind of the trend in standards, and I can't explain why that logic is, but it's always been true.
Okay.
Well, since standards were about.
The standards are not solely created by the state.
No.
They're created by the State Department. They're created by the EOC.
Correct.
And I believe if I remember this correctly, at the base, teachers decide, a group of teachers, what standards ought to be taught in a particular course. So you're pulling a group of teachers together, and not that they are not conscientious, because they're very conscientious, but anytime you ask a teacher about their class, they will, I think, fairly quickly tell you, well, to really know this, you got to know all of this. So it starts with a premise of you're asking people that are well versed in it, what does a student need to know? Oh, they need to know all this. Well, given time, ability, and background, every student can't know all this. So there's a problem at the foundational level. Then the further you get from the foundational level and the further you get from people that are actually putting this into practice, it becomes even less logical. And like a lot of times, if you took that group of teachers that came up with the initial items, and they had to then sit in the room with the teachers that are trying to teach all those items, yeah, but there's not really a way to do that. The other thing that any standardized test that compares you to a standard rather than to the ability or the results of your peers, that makes it, it's based initially on a faulty assumption that everybody in the fourth grade is of the same ability in the fourth month of the fourth grade. That's not true. That's not true in this room. You could pick any one of those subjects, and people in this room would fall out on the normal distribution curve. That's a pretty smart room, so, you know, the curve would be, the peak of that would be pretty high. But they're gonna fall out on this normal distribution curve. Some people are gonna go quickly through the material and understand it thoroughly. Others with a little more time, a little more instruction, they will reach a thorough understanding. And some will struggle through the whole thing. Because this assumes that everybody is ready. We mentioned something earlier about the developmentally appropriate. It would seem that sometimes we forget completely about the fact that every person at a certain age in a certain grade does not have the same level of ability in a particular subject. That doesn't mean that people can't learn that subject. They're just not going to all learn it at the same rate, nor are they going to all learn it with the same level of instruction. There's some people you can literally hand them a book. They'll read it, and they'll know how to do what's in that book. There are others that you might have to take page by page and help them to understand what's on each page and help them move through it, and it might take them 3 times as long. And there is no accommodation for the rate of ability or the rate of ability to understand. Again, that doesn't mean that there's a group that can't learn, but it just takes a different approach, a different amount of time, and people are ready at different points in their chronological, or really their mental age. And we seem to, anybody that got a certificate had to take some kind of course in adolescent growth and development, or human growth and development, or early childhood growth and development. But it seems we sometimes forget the things that you should have learned in those courses about everybody's not ready to do everything on the same time. Probably you all that have multiple children, they weren't all ready, even if they're close to the same age, you observe them kind of over time. They were ready to do the same thing at different times. And so you imagine what it would be like when a teacher sitting in the classroom, 22, 24, 25, that they're operating on all these different, maybe for lack of a better term, levels of readiness that you're trying to address, so that at the end of the year, when they give these tests, they can all be equally prepared to do well.
Thank you for that. I have one more quick question. Please remind me, do we in South Carolina now have a graduation requirement for any type of civics class, or is that built into the government?
Yeah, it's built into government, and then we do have civics courses kids can choose to take, but it's not a requirement.
It's not a requirement.
They have to take the citizenship test. That is the only state requirement regarding civics. And they take that in government, if I remember correctly. That's actually part of the government. They have to take it. We collect the answers. They don't normally grade it on it. It's just that they have to take that test.
There was a time a number of years ago, although it was not a requirement, most school districts taught civics in the 9th grade.
Yes.
To go back, I didn't go back that far, and a few years forward from that, pretty generally they taught civics in the 9th grade. That probably shifted maybe in the late 80s
Has,
It's kind of similar to U.S. history, which needs to be a 2-year or 2-unit. We do blocks, so you can do them both the same year. That needs to be a 2-unit course, U.S. history. And government and civics ought to be a standalone course, not half of government econ.
why do I feel like I've heard rumblings of them wanting to do that? Is that something I've read somewhere? Like, have you heard, like, is that something you think our state has an appetite to move towards, or?
I don't think so, because, I mean, we did talk, I know it was talked about when we did the new standards, because of the difficulty of covering that whole year in 1 year, but ultimately they decided not to do it. I think part of the reason is because it's so crammed already with how many, you know, you have to require both years then of U.S. history, which then adds another social studies course to the requirements, and we're already kind of at our limit for requirements. They'd have to look it would basically what it would have done, it was eliminate an elective, so the kids would have had elective taken away.
I mean, I think it's something, I think it would be worthwhile for us to advocate.
Yeah, I don't
We
Well-
probably shared this with y'all before, the last place I was high school principal, we did that. This was back, you heard Jeff reference, tech prep and college prep. You may remember the time there were the 2 pathways. For us, for college prep students, U.S. history college prep was a 2-unit course. So if you were a college prep student, you had to take it. If you were tech prep, you could take the 1 unit, or you could take the 2 unit. That's the only way we could get around the fact we couldn't make it a requirement, because it's not a state requirement. So we couldn't require that to graduate, but we had a pretty strong feeling that you need 2 years. And we were teaching AV, so it took 2 years to take it. But you needed 2 years to fully understand U.S. history. Well, that's been 25 years ago now that we were doing that. Well, now we've had 25 more years of U.S. history. You can't, there's the reason the colleges teach 2 courses. You can't teach that thoroughly.
I just feel like with the political climate, what it is, that civics is there'd be an appetite for that. I mean, I feel like I've read that, seen that. A lot of people are calling or suggesting that our younger folks couldn't pass the citizenship exam. So I didn't even realize that we gave that as part of government. Did we fold personal finance into economics?
Yes.
So it's not a standalone class?
Yes.
Okay. Because I know that was another
Correct.
thing that folks advocated for.
Yeah, we do also teach a personal finance class, so kids can take the full class if they
Right.
choose to. But that one is now folded, the South Carolina requirements folded into economics.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
and I should clarify too, the civics test that they only do, I can't remember how many questions. It's not the full test. They have to have a certain number of questions you pull from the test, so it's not the actual full test. It's just a sampling of the test.
Okay. Well, I have really appreciated this presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Mosley. Ms. Leventis Wells?
Jeff, on the standards that are changing for these teachers,
Yes.
how are we going to help them? Because I think teachers are so overworked and so stressed out over trying to accomplish all of the things that they have to accomplish. It really upsets me now. I know the state does all of these things because they can, but I don't think they understand the ramifications that they're implementing on all of our professionals that are trying to get our students up to standards and test well when they're sitting there flipping them around like it's a pizza.
So a couple of things that Greenville does is kind of unique. That chart that I showed you towards the end, this is actually fairly unusual for districts to do, and our size helps with this a lot as well. If I can get there. But the very end where we showed you that chart of units, many districts don't actually do that. Many districts don't have curriculum for their teachers as far as a pacing guide goes and as far as actually units that are fleshed out. Greenville does that because we're size and we're able to do that. But we've actually shared this with several districts in the state who've asked, could they have our curriculum to use with their students because they don't have the resources to build that curriculum. So that's one area that our teachers have a huge advantage because we build, and I say we, but it's really teachers, teams of teachers. We don't do that academic specialist wise. Teams of teachers build those units out. And then the teachers then just have to take that and build out the lessons. Some courses are a little bit more scripted, depending on which math book we actually choose. We've not chosen yet. Because we're in that process right now. The state has given us which ones we can choose from. Some of those may be a little bit more specific as far as resources goes day to day, but that curriculum map will support them in those math standards development. The power standards is the other thing that really helps support them. And then same thing for English. I would say the HMH curriculum we chose last year, that really is, I don't want to say scripted, but it's very detail oriented as far as what teachers, now they still have, to your point, they still have to work and study and learn it. But there's a lot laid out for teachers in this district that would not be available to teachers in other districts.
Yeah, I feel for other districts, but I really care about our district. And I know teachers have so many deadlines they must meet, so many standards they have to complete, so many this, and this every day. They go to additional meetings to find out this. They go to different trainings to update this. And I think we stress them out tremendously. And I just would like to know how we could de-stress them a little bit. What could we do to help them in the classroom? I mean, I just feel like we're overburdening we're burning our teachers out is what we're doing. And I don't want that to happen.
Well, again, that's what my team does. So that's all these things that we just showed in resources. That's what's meant to lower that stress level of teachers, because it's a whole lot easier having a unit for you done that you just have to build lessons off of versus having to create that from scratch. So that's one of the reasons we do the unit plans. That's why we do the standards, power standards, all that stuff that if we weren't doing that, teachers would have to do it. So everything we do, and then of course the training, yes, we do offer training. Not all of that's required for teachers, but when you're implementing new math standards, there's going to be things that teachers are going to have to come to learn about the new standards. I mean, that's unavoidable that they're going to have to do that, but that's actually going to help them as well because they're not having to read through that whole massive document. We're pulling out what we need to pull out for them that's most important. Our team will support next year, both elementary and middle and high. We'll support, like we always do, that just-in-time professional learning. So a lot of times we are previewing for our teachers before they get to those units. We're previewing saying, hey, here's what's coming up next. Here's what you need to teach your kids. Here's what needs to be the standards you need to learn. And here's what you need to teach. So that when they get to those units, they're not having to spend as much time reviewing that because we're providing that PD form. Now, again, that's not required, but for the teachers that come to those big sessions, many of those teachers would say that's a huge help because that's time less they have to spend studying the material to learn what they need to do next. So that's really the whole goal of, the two directors in that department is to figure out what do teachers need and how do we make that easier for them.
Right. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thanks, Ms. Leventis-Wells. Mr. Cochran.
Thank you. I believe this is on slide 4. If we could go back.
Sorry, which slide?
4?
4.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Yes.
I was just wondering, obviously, for the most part, 3rd through 8th, things are looking pretty good there. And then when we get to English 2, we've got a big drop off compared to how we're doing relative to the rest of the state. And while that would probably put us still in the top third, it's still a pretty big drop off from those earlier rankings. Is that, I think you said this was last year's scores that you were using, or?
To compare, last year's of this year's, yes.
Do you happen to know was there the same drop off basically the year before in the rankings that we're seeing this time, or is that something fairly new?
That one for English 2 is actually new. We went up the year previously. We dropped this year, and if I remember correctly, Jason may know the exact number. I believe that overall we're still like 86. Is that correct?
Right. The thing with English 2 is the scores are very compacted, and so from one year to the next, even a 1 point change could change your rating 4 or 5 steps.
That is actually, Mr. Cochran, one of the high, as far as the ratings goes, that's one of the highest DOCs because 86% of our kids met the standard, which kind of shows you the rest of the state where they're performing in the 80s, 90s, which again, that's our goal. We want to be in the top 10 in everything. That'll be the big focus. That has been a big focus this year is really, how are the other districts around us outperforming us in English too? Even though we're 86, we need to get up there towards that, 10th, 11th point.
And since Ms. Doolin kind of called me out there earlier about being a math teacher, I would like to go back and I'd like to challenge an answer.
And you're correct, Mr. Cochran. I just went back and looked at the PowerPoint we're uploading. The PowerPoint we're uploading, C is the correct answer. The poll everywhere one was wrong, so it was A. So you were correct. I was going to mention that. Since you were called out specifically, I was going to mention that. Since it was your reputation that was on the line.
I appreciate that.
The one that we're going to upload after this that one is correct.
Got you back, Joe.
It was the one about the website tracking. Did you get that one right too, Ms. Mosley? C is the correct answer. Mr. Cochran was correct. Here, I'm going to pull it up for you.
I digress.
It was the website tracking one, this one here. It was C. The one that we're going to, and by the way, we're uploading the one with the correct answers on it to after the fact for you on the board docs. That is correct in that version. The poll everywhere was wrong, but C is the correct answer on this one.
Hey, Jeffrey.
So you were correct.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Ms. Brett. That's all.
Restoring his reputation.
Thank you, Mr. Cochran. Ms. Middleton.
Thank you. So the standards, Jeff, would you say the standards are doable, or would you say they're aspirational?
If you're going to do all the standards that are outlaid in those documents, I think they're aspirational. The power standards, I think, are doable. If we talk about the power standards of what we have narrowed down for our teachers, I think those are doable. That's one of the reasons we did that. But I would say as the documents are written, I think, now I haven't delved as much into the new math standard. Those may be a little bit more doable because the state, I think, has taken to heart what teachers have said and what people have said about slower is better with math as far as going deeper than it is surface level. So, but I would say the other content areas are probably more aspirational, the way the documents are written.
Yeah, I suppose you have to always aim for like the perfect student. Is that right? Would you say that?
So I would say the standards have done a good job. I think the standards really, you want to go deeper. So for the kids, if you look at those standards carefully, there's ways I can actually go deeper than what the standards are asking me to do for those students that are more of that advanced. That's really what we teach our teachers. Like take a standard, there's a level in that standard that all kids really have to meet to master that standard. But there's ways that you can actually go deeper of that standard for those kids that might be a little bit more advanced. For example, you might go into a little bit more difficult math equations, even though that might not be what the standard is asking you to go fully into. So that's really what our teachers do. We build some of that differentiation into our course maps for kids as well, so the teachers don't have to do all that necessarily. And they have tools that can help them do that as well. Some of the newer AI tools as well that can do that. But yeah, I mean, they're really built for, I would say the standards are normally built for the quote unquote the average kid, the norm. And then you go up or down based on the students in your class as far as remediation or acceleration.
Do you still have, I taught over a decade ago now, science in high school. And we always had like kind of levels, like standard classes and honors classes or college classes or whatever, advanced classes. So is that still something that you have?
Yes, we have we have honors level, and then we have AP dual credit. So in South Carolina, the levels would be CP, then you move to honors, and then you move to AP dual credit. As far as the weightings go, those courses are weighted differently. The further you go up, they're weighted differently.
So as far as just ability level, say biology, you would either be CP or you would be honors. one of
Yes.
those. Or, I mean, of course, you could always go on and do AP,
Correct.
but that's like,
That's later on.
that's another thing, okay?
That's later.
But those are the two levels now,
In
okay?
ninth grade, that would be true. Ninth or 10th grade kids, more or ninth grade kids would be more likely, in many cases, to take the honors biology, or in 10th grade. But yes, those would be the two levels available.
Do they still teach physical science?
It's an offering that they can take. Yes, they can take. It's not a required course. It's the within the science pack pipeline, but they can take it. Yes.
So they can go, because I remember it used to be physical science, you had to take that.
Yes.
And then you went to biology, but now you can skip physical science, just go directly to biology.
Yes.
You don't need the physical
The
science.
reason some of that changes because anything, and don't ask me to explain why this is, but there's probably a reason, I'm sure. But anything that you take prior to biology cannot count as a lab science. So you have to have 3 lab sciences, if I remember correctly, Tanya. 3 lab sciences is what's required for graduation. So if you take a science course before biology, even if it has labs in it, it cannot count as a lab science. Biology is that gateway course that once you take biology, then the courses that are labs can count after that. So that gets tricky because if you do, and we do have kids that take a course before biology because they just need that. I think we call it integrated science right now. And that's almost like a hodgepodge of science that help prepare them for biology and chemistry going forward. So we do have kids that, a large number that would not be ready for biology in 9th grade. So we do take the integrated science instead.
Okay. And I guess with the block schedule, that would probably really help with the labs because you would have more time.
The 90 minutes helps certainly in lab situations. Yes, that's a big pro for science teachers.
Okay. Okay. That's what I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Middleton. Without any objection, I'd like to extend our time another 10 minutes, please. Oh, that was good, right? Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell.
Thank you for this presentation. And I don't have any questions. I just wanted to state to people that they need to look at what it is that our teachers have to do and to not be quick to judge, to say the teachers don't do anything. If they look at what they have to do, all of this information, I've always said that education should be the highest paid profession in this world. So I wanted to say that. I don't have any questions. I'm glad that you're putting this out here where that the parents can go in and see what our teachers have to go through. And we've been asking for less standards for years. And so they are finally doing something about it. And I am so glad that they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell. I have a few questions. So kind of going to a rudimentary level, if you will, can you explain to me standards versus indicators, especially using those words here?
Yeah, so let's just go to English here, because I think I've got some in there. Yeah, so for the English here, the standards are typically going to be very broad as far as a concept or topic that kids need to learn. The indicators are more to tell you how to do or narrow that standard down a little bit. So if we take that, that's not English, that's math. I'm not going to do math because that was not my subject, so we're going to go back to English. English was my subject. Slide 6, thank you. I'm much more comfortable in English. So when you look at, for example, that last one, I think I mentioned briefly, but write a narrative to develop real or imagined experiences using effective technique. That's very broad. What does effective technique mean? There's a lot of effective techniques, so what does that actually mean? So what those indicators are going to do is actually break that down into actual, okay, here's specifically what you need to learn. So engage the reader by establishing a situation and or setting up a problem or observation. So that's a technique. Provide an ending and conclusion that clearly connects the narrative's relevance to the intended purpose of the writing. So those are actually the techniques. It's only got, 5 there? It's only narrowed them down to 5 that necessarily that standard is going to focus on. Now, if you go back and look at the standards, there's going to be some other standards about narratives and narrative writing that will go further into additional effective techniques. But I always think of it as the standards is a very broad piece, and then the indicators really break down for you that standard on what exactly you need to teach in that standard.
And so they're being tested on the indicators, is that right?
Yes, or, I mean, sometimes it is the standard, that's a kind of a broader standard, but it can be just a standard, because in some of those English ones, you'll only see standards. Certain ones only have a standard, they don't have indicators. Younger grades specifically, because there's really nothing else to break down, so know and apply phonics and word analysis skills of decoding and encoding words. That's really not, we're not gonna break that down by every word that could possibly encode or decode. So that's going to be a very broad standard. There's no indicators under there, but kids do need to be able to apply phonics to decode and encode.
How often are these tests given? Is it a once a year, twice a year, once a year?
So these tests are only, the South Carolina tests for accountability are only given once a year at the end of the year. We do the benchmarks by state requirements, where state requires you to do benchmarks. The benchmarks would be tied to the test, but we just report those. So there's really no, and we use that information to help improve mastery of standards for our kids. But the South Carolina test is only done, well, once a year. Every child would only do it once a year. Block schedules, all those EOCs, of course, we do in December and May.
Right, okay. Do you, in your professional opinion, believe that there is an alternative for the classroom as far as these tests are concerned? I feel like it's such it's huge. I mean, it's just huge.
Yeah, so Jeff's personal opinion, because that's what you asked for.
That's what I'm asking for.
You know, one of the things that we explored a couple of years ago, actually, the states, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, the states actually had an option when they were doing the federal guidelines where you could actually request alternate to testing. And I forget what they called that. Jason may remember. I actually reached out about 4 years ago or 3 years ago to inquire, hey, could we do this? Because South Carolina, or could Greenville, could we work in South Carolina to actually build something alternative to testing, more comprehensive base, instead of testing at the end of the year? Unfortunately, South Carolina did not apply for that. And because South Carolina did not apply for that flexibility, we are not allowed to go down that path of trying to develop alternate to that. There are districts and states that do, though, already around the country. Some other states applied for that and said, yes, we want that flexibility. We want to be able to develop something other than standardized tests to test knowledge of our kids. If a state opted into that, then the districts actually can develop different things to show kids mastery on standards that doesn't have to do with testing necessarily. It could be demonstration. It could be a lot of different ways on there. So we did actually look after, again, just personal opinion, not necessarily Greenville County Schools opinion, although I think Greenville County Schools is definitely aligned. Dr. Royster knew we were asking for that when we were asked for it at the time, would be, yes, I think there's a lot of kids that don't do well taking tests. I was one of those kids that struggled with test taking. I'm just not great at it. Give me a task to do, though, and I can demonstrate all day long that I know the knowledge and I can do the task. And I think we have a lot of kids that are in that bucket where that experiential demonstration would be much more beneficial to kids than maybe sometimes testing would be.
So that window closed for us, meaning you can't go back and say we'd like to try
Correct.
this.
Technically,
Okay.
it was never opened, but yes,
Okay.
they never asked for it.
Okay.
And so I thought it was every district could request it, but then when I looked into it with the State Department, the state actually has to kick it off and say, we want to be one of those states that would like to be open to trying that.
Sure.
Because the state did not apply for that, we cannot do it.
Over. Okay, cool. Well, I appreciate your presentation. Thank you so much. I learned a lot. Back to you, Dr. Stiles.
Thank you for chairing instruction, Ms. Brett. And thank you again, Mr. McCoy, for your outstanding work in that presentation. Very informative. We're going to move into administration at this time. And we have one administrative item, and that's 4.01, Board Docs to Community Transition. Dr. Royster, would you like to speak to that before our presenter?
Other than simply to introduce Ms. Fitzer, who will present regarding that transition. Same company, newer product. You all now, I believe, all have it loaded, but we're still running both systems. And we'll run that till we're sure we don't need to run that anymore, because sometimes there are unforeseen glitches that arise. And I think we even had some related back to the company not having necessarily to do with our application of it. So we'll maintain that as long as we need to. Ms. Fitzer?
Thank you, Dr. Royster. Good morning. For those who had trouble logging in, I sent some instructions. I don't know if you've all had time to try them. But as you can see, it's a process. I was not here in 2003 when we transitioned into board docs. I imagine there were some bumps in the road at that time. But basically, we have been using board docs since 2003. It is basically the equivalent at this point of having an obsolete iPhone. They've been putting their, they're not really making improvements to it. And most importantly, perhaps it's not mobile friendly. So it's really not it doesn't really work for the folks who are using it in that way. So the company, the vendor has been really putting their resources into this new product. And they've migrated our data over and working with us. But we will keep both sites functioning until everybody is fully able to access everything they need and comfortable with, or reasonably comfortable with the new site. So currently, and also this is going to serve as an introduction for our staff as well as any members of the public that might be watching. So currently, if you go to the Greenville County Schools homepage and you go to the About menu, you have school board, and there's a direct link to board docs. There's a direct link to a Board of Trustees page. And on that page, it includes a link to board docs in here. So that's how many people access it. So basically what we are going to have now with Diligent Community is we have our own new page that is the public site that will replace this page on the GCS website. So all the information that is currently there has been moved over. So I'll give a little bit of a tour, and I think especially for a lot of our staff members and for the board members, you're perfectly fine using this to get information. You'll be able to access everything on here other than executive content for obvious reasons. And I will say, with the news site, with Diligent, we have, could you shut that off? Thank you. That was from the last one, sorry. So we have a few vocabulary changes. So instead of executive content, as we had in board docs, it's now member content. So you all are the members. You Board of Trustees are the members. And so you will be able to access everything but member content off of this public page. So the public page looks, pretty similar in look and feel to our regular Greenville County Schools pages. I'm going to go to full screen. It's got a calendar feature, so you can look under today and see the meetings that are there for today, the ones that are in 2 weeks, links to our socials, list of today's meetings, upcoming meetings. If a meeting has been posted, if the material is there, it's hyperlinked, so it'll show underlining. If you can see on these upcoming meetings, well, we haven't made those live yet. We haven't made the February 25th board meeting live yet, so there's nothing to click on there. But it's there to see that meeting is coming up. All of the same kind of information that was on the old site, main page is there as well. And what I think is more user-friendly on this site is we've got these tiles down here. And again, if you were on a mobile device, they would line up differently. But you can click to access board member content information. This watch board meetings gives you the information of where you need to watch the live stream, how to access the recordings. There's a more robust search feature. Many of us have been very frustrated with the old search feature, so a better search feature for you. Public comment, in accord with the policy that you all passed last month. Nobody took advantage of it yet, but we did have the online registration open, and so there is a link here to register in advance for board meetings, as well as all the rules associated with that. And to answer Mr. Cochran's question from last month about whether that was automated or not automated, so we did have to generate a spreadsheet of what are the dates of the meetings and what are the times they need to open and close, but that was a one-time thing, and now it's all programmed in. So it's going to automatically open, automatically close for every meeting in accordance with the policy and rule. And then the last, so our board policies that you're also used to accessing from board docs will be moved over. They are going to be, they're doing an update this week, so that will happen. So in the meantime, there's a link right there. But down here, this empty spot that you see, that is going to say board policies. And since we don't have it on our current site, I'm going to show it to you on Evergreen Public Schools in Washington that also uses Community, similar site to ours. They go back to their homepage. So on their homepage, they've got several tiles like we do, or not as many actually. So we will have a similar link to policy. It will go to the policy manual. They have theirs in 3 languages. Ours are just in 1, but it'll be similar to what you're used to with board docs, if you can see that well enough, where there's, kind of an accordion menu of the different policies, and then you can click on them and view them. And then in this portal, there's back buttons, and you can always go back. So now we'll go back to Greenville County Schools. So one way for board members to get into the non-public site is to go up to the corner. I'm logged in as Dr. Presley today, but it would say sign in, and then that's a place you could go to sign in. There's also direct links to get to Diligent. So you could hit my meetings right here where I am. And that will take you to the insider site. So for the public, this is not what they're going to be able to see, but this is what you see. So on the left side is the navigation. If you click on this little hamburger thing, not everybody apparently is familiar with that term, but these 3 lines, that's called a hamburger menu. You can open it up and it will tell you what those icons stand for. Are you getting hungry? I'm sorry. So the main ones you're really going to be focused on are meetings. You can also access the policies from here once they're loaded. The document library, we're going to clean up and clean out, but that'll be where you can get your expense report, committee of the whole, agenda request, just the few things that you need. And then also you can always link back to the public site and open that in a new window. But back to that page. So meetings is really the main place you'll be. And if you ever accidentally, or when you log in, oops, that's not what I meant. If you end up on the page with the portal, you just want to click on that tile that says community and get back in there. So if you look at, so we're already finished with our special called meeting, so that's going to be listed under your previous meetings. And if I click on that, I'll show you what that looks like. So we've got the agenda, which was very short. And what you can see as a board member, and let me expand. So you've got the ability to make this bigger. You can take that sidebar away to give yourself more room. You can go to full screen to give yourself more room. And you can see you can make it bigger, make it smaller. But basically you've got these links to what is now member content, and those have little locks next to them. So the lock icon means that is something that is not accessible to the public. I'm showing it now because we've already announced these things that have taken place. But those were the items. Those are attachments that the public cannot see that you can see. You can navigate this is what we referred to as the cover sheet, we still do, and then, the first attachment that you would have. So you can just click on down, and then when there is an action recommended, it will show. If it's an information item, we will not, it won't show anything because it'll just be for information. So the cover sheets will look pretty much like they always have. And then the agenda itself will look a little bit different. I'm going to go out of full screen here. And then some features I wanted to show you all that are pretty neat that we didn't have before is you can, prior to the meeting, during the meeting, you can highlight some things that you have a question about or you wanted to call attention to. You can underline some of the text. You can write a note. You can make any notes that you want. And you can also, if you click on this annotations menu, you can actually make yourself a note, ask about this, issue. And then you could make a note, and those are saved only for you. And you can print it out, you can save it, you can print it with the annotations and comments, but you can make all these notes and do that in the documents, in the attachments, and those are for your use during the meeting to help you ask questions or to remember things that you might want to remember for later. And then if you want to delete them, you can do that too. So those, I think, are the main important features I wanted to show you that you can do. If we go back to our home and we go to our current meeting, you'll see it's a little more robust since it's a longer meeting. But you've got the whole agenda there with all attachments listed, and you can click on each one of them and look at it. For the public, going back to the public site, what I think is also very nice is for meetings, they have a similar ability. So if we go to today's committee of the whole, you can hit split screen and people can just follow right along with what we're doing. Innovative courses, and then there's the attachment. I want to make the attachment bigger. I want to go full screen. So there's ways to do that. And be able to view it better. So you can zoom in, zoom out. Here's Jeff's item and the presentation that you just saw is right there. And I think I've covered all of the basic tour of a community. Are there any questions?
Ms. Leventis Wells.
First of all, Nancy, thank you so much for answering all our questions, especially mine. And thank you for meeting with me last Friday to find out that the reason I couldn't get in is because I was not connected, and then you found out others weren't as well. So you are the guru of getting us to where we are today. You're very computer savvy and very knowledgeable. And I too am concerned that you're going to be going to Egypt in March, because I think I'm going to take out some kind of insurance policy so when you do that, nothing happens. So I'm thankful for all of your brilliance and all you do for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Leventis Wells. Ms. Brett?
I'm still getting the white page. I assume I can just give you guys my computer later and we'll figure that out. Okay, thank you.
Yes, and as noted, we will not close the board docs site until we are satisfied that everybody is adequately accessing the new site.
Ms. Mosley?
Nancy, just to clarify, I got your email about the fix.
Uh-huh. Okay.
The link that you provided where you told us to sign out.
Yes.
It's not taking us to an error.
Okay, is Bill still here? It's not. Okay.
Which is fine. I just wanted to let you know.
Okay, I will share that with
Fix is
our,
not.
our ETS folks have been incredibly helpful, and sorry about that.
Ms. Middleton?
So I did sign in already, and the first page I come up with says boards and governance, compliance and ethics and all that. Is
Yes,
that-
so that's the one where you just click on the tile that says community. If you ever end up back, I was trying to get there to show you all, and I couldn't seem to navigate to it, but let me try it from here.
Apparently I've lost community. Right there. Oh, there it is, okay. So everything goes to this community thing, okay. I feel like I may need a private tutorial. Is there
We are
such a
happy
thing?
I'm happy to do that. So we changed it because the old version is not mobile friendly, is not having features added, has a lot of glitches. I know we're seeing a lot of glitches here, but I believe it will get smoother. But we really had almost no choice in the fact that they just are not. It's like, as I said, like having an obsolete phone that's not supported anymore.
Okay, Mr. Sailors?
When you open when we go to the icon for the website, and on the bookmarks, you have Gmail for our email addresses and board docs. Are you going to change out the link to board docs to Diligent or add that?
I'm sorry, you're on the public site?
Yeah. Or is that a private tutorial issue?
No, it just might be something that needs to be updated. We're still fixing, so I'm sorry, on this page?
Right here, see, right here? Where we've got bookmarks for both our email addresses and for board docs.
Oh, well, that's something that is just on your laptop, so you can delete the board, when it's time, you can just delete the board docs bookmark.
Add a Diligent.
Yes.
Also, when you're talking about mobile devices, it's asking for site name. That is Greenville County Schools. Am I correct? What do we put there? Right here? Or is that a private tutorial also?
That would be, I'd have to look at that, but the public site will be, you wouldn't have to log into
Okay.
that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you again, Ms. Fitz, for that. We appreciate all that you're doing to support us and bridging to this community. Our next matter of business is 5.01, Building and Grounds, and Mr. Cochran, you will serve as our chair. You have the floor at this time.
Thank you. Our first matter of business is item 5.01, which is the Facilities Project Report. This item is for information only. Dr. Royster, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you, Mr. Cochran. We don't have anything particularly to bring to your attention. Glad to answer any question you might have. I would note that Mr. Benton, Jamie Benton, is here in lieu of Colonel Carlin, who's unfortunately out sick today. So any question that you might have, here I will attempt to answer that for you.
Ms. Doolin?
I was looking at this last night and doing some calculations, and I wondered, it looks like for most of the additions that are being built, the cost is around or just under 100,000 per student that will be added, except at Fountain Inn Elementary, or K-8, where it's significantly more. It's like $34 million more than the others would be per student. So I wondered why that one costs so much more.
Two reasons. You have there an expansion of the current facility to serve additional K through 5 students, then the expansion to serve 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. None of those other additions are programmed for dual use. Elementary construction is the least expensive construction that we do. Middle school is the next most expensive, and high school is the most expensive construction we do because of the ancillary areas that they have to have in addition to regular classroom space.
But is it's 500 students being added at Fountain Inn Elementary?
Yes.
Well, that's still not quite twice as much, but still at Fountain Inn High, that you just said is the most expensive, that's adding 1,250 students.
But the ad at Fountain Inn High School, you may recall, the core of Fountain Inn High School was built to support 2,000 students. So that's adding classrooms only. There is no core at Fountain Inn Elementary School to support a middle school.
So it's adding another core plus elementary plus.
Yes.
6, 7, 8. Okay. Well, that makes more sense. Thank you.
Mhm.
That's the only question.
Certainly.
Are there any other questions? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to our final matter of business. And our final matter of business is 5.02, which is the lease agreement with the Center for Community Services. Dr. Oyster, would you like to speak to this item?
Yes, sir. Just briefly to highlight a couple of things that are a little bit unusual. One would be the term of the lease. They requested 15 years. That request is based on the fact that they wish to invest in some improvements in that facility. We don't maintain that facility. They've used it. I don't know how long it's been leased to them. I've been here 20 years and it's been leased to them at least 20. It formerly was the Child Development Center on that property. A new facility was constructed almost adjacent to it on the back of the Bryson Elementary property. So the district's not had use for that facility since the new Child Development Center was built. There would be no foreseeable use in the future for that building. For us to bring that up to code, it would be cheaper to demo it and build anew. However, the location of it on the property really doesn't lend itself to an expansion of Bryson. If you think about where Bryson Elementary School is situated, you should have an aerial in your packet about it. It is at the very rear of the property, as far remote from the current elementary school building as one can be and be on the same property. So we have no immediate future use for it. They asked for a longer term lease, 15 years. We recommend approval of that. The lease amount is the same that it's been. You can see attached who the tenants are. And also, this is with the understanding the lease agreement provides the district right 90-day termination, regardless of the 15-year term. There are some other reasons for termination in there, but basically we incur no cost with this. So it's our recommendation that continue to extend that lease to the Center for Community Services. Go ahead and answer any questions you might have, or Mr. Webb be able to answer any questions you might have specifically about the lease contract. Other than the term, it's standard lease contract.
We do have, thank you, Dr. Oyster. We do have a recommended motion from the administration here. Do we have a maker of the motion?
Motion to approve is presented. Second.
So we have a motion to approve and a second. Do we have any questions or discussion on this matter? Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell.
Dr. Royster, where that old Bryson is located is right beside the other Bryson, right? What is beside the CDC Center?
The CDC.
Is that right
one,
next door?
The new one is if you face in Bryson Elementary School, our CDC is to the right side of the back of the property, and the old CDC, which is the building for lease, is on the left side of the back of the property. And you enter both of them from the street that they front on, which is the street behind Bryson Elementary School.
Do we not think that, you know, with that area growing down there, that we will increase our CDC center at some point?
If
Whether we might need that land, that property?
If we increase CDC capacity there, we would do it attached to the main building. We're trying to get away from those standalone CDCs. In fact, that one, as well as the one at Ellen Woodside, now operates subordinate to the principal of those schools, like the 4K classrooms and all the other schools do.
So is the CDC center right beside the elementary school?
It's right behind it,
It's behind it.
on the same piece of property. We own the whole piece of property.
And then this community, the old Bryson, is right beside it.
Which was the old CDC. It was the Child Development Center before that new building was built.
So we don't think that we'll have to.
If we're going to build on to Bryson, which is certainly a possibility in the future, as you mentioned, because of growth, we would build on to the existing elementary school building, which is the very front of the property. There wouldn't be any way we'd want to add back there at that very back.
Where the CDC center is.
But if we did, with 90 days notice, you can terminate this lease. So there is really no downside to the lease. If they did not wish to lease this and no one else did, our recommendation would be the building be demoed. And that would obviously be a cost to us.
I'm not
We
opposed.
we wouldn't need it standing back there empty.
I'm not opposed to the lease. I was just looking at the proximity and,
Yes, ma'am.
and with that area growing so much. That's all. Thank you, Dr. Stiles.
Anyone else have a question? I did have one question when I was looking through there. I was kind of expecting somewhere in there, and maybe I overlooked it, among the other insurances, for there to be like basic fire insurance and whatever. And I don't think I saw that as one of the things that was required for them to have. But like I say, maybe I overlooked that. If somebody could speak to that.
Well,
We have structured this that it is up to them for property and fire to have it if they so choose. As Dr. Royster said, historically for this lease, we have put the onus on them because otherwise the district doesn't need the building. We would most likely tear it down. So it has shifted to them in their discretion.
I think the applicable provision will be item 6, property insurance. Is that correct, Mr. Williams?
Yeah, yes.
Thank you. Any further questions at all? Hearing none, we will proceed to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Motion passes, and this concludes the Buildings and Grounds portion of our meeting. And so, Madam Chairman, at this point, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cochran, for chairing Building and Grounds. And this concludes our Committee of the Whole agenda today. Before I take a motion, just a couple of reminders. First, I'd like to thank everyone who's online for joining us today and for your participation. Also, board members, I want to remind you that we'll make our way to Conference Room A at the close of this meeting for our workshop on South Carolina employability credential. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion to conclude our Committee of the Whole session.
Motion to adjourn.
Mrs. Doolin has made a motion, and Mrs. Leventis Wells has made a second. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, no. The motion carries. Let's take a brief break before we start our workshop. Let's take about a 10-minute break, and let's meet at our workshop at 10:23 sharp. Thank you so much. Excuse me, 11:23 sharp. And our meeting completes, and our meeting concludes at 11:13 a.m. And their lunch will arrive shortly, so feel free to pick that up when you see it outside.